Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new ProRevenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "He almost hit me on the freeway. What I did next scared the crap out of him." Okay. I know how stupid this was and how bad it could have turned out first of all. One night I was driving to my girlfriend's house, and as I was getting on the highway, the guy in front of me is going like 15 miles per hour. To enter a 70 miles per hour get up to a reasonable speed. He didn't take too kindly to this and came up on my side, flipping me off and cursing me out. He was very clearly drunk. He then moves in front of me and slams the brakes, moves back to my side flipping and cursing, then behind me about 2 feet from my rear bumper. And just keeps doing this cycle over and over. For like 10 minutes. Eventually, he threw a bunch of fast food, complete with a milkshake, at my car. It was pretty late and there wasn't a lot of traffic. Eventually, he pulled into the far right lane, which became an exit only. He slowed down to get a couple of last words in on me. Up to this point, I had been pretty chill, maybe a head shake here or a furrowed brow. Earlier that day I had also taken my girlfriend's little brother to shoot BB guns, including a BB pistol that was an exact replica of a Colt 1911. You've probably already figured out where this is headed. I waited till he was already so close to the exit he couldn't follow me or pull a real gun on me. Finally, the last second I pull the gun up and yell something vaguely gangster. Probably point blank SUCKAH. Or something equally stupid. This guy's jaw immediately hit his lap. He ducked down and when he did so, inadvertently yanked the steering wheel to the right. Hard, and about 200 feet short of the exit. His car went across the median, bottomed out and tore his undercarriage up something fierce. I immediately panicked. There was nobody anywhere near us, but I took the next exit and U-turned. I thought if the cops were looking for me they'd expect me to be heading the same direction. I hid the gun in a culvert at the exit and headed back the same way I had just come. He was stranded on the side of the road, with police coming to him. I went down a few more miles and turned around again, so heading the original direction again. I figured if the cops pulled me over it would be my word against a drunk dude, and I didn't even have the incriminating evidence anymore. He was getting a field sobriety test. Again, I know how dumb it was. I was young and stupid and would never do it again. And if he would have gotten seriously hurt, or worse hurt someone else, I would still feel horrible. But being that none of that happened, and the guy was such a colossal butthole prior, EHHH. The next one is titled, "Petroleum Jellied Desk." Had a chief warrant officer in Iraq throw a bottle of petroleum jelly at my after I got done ranting about something I've long since forgotten. Told me to go, take care of it, and come back when I feel better. During his afternoon siesta, I spent an hour covering everything on his desk with it in the most inconspicuous spots, e.g. inside the handle of a coffee mug, underneath the handle of the Keurig pod loader, behind the canister holding Keurig coffee pods, anywhere he could grab something and not see it without first inspecting it. He came back and proceeded to curse at a rate never witnessed before, as he had to continuously wipe all the jelly off his hands every 3 minutes. He caught the jelly on the inside rims of his over-the-ear headphones before he rimmed his ears with it, but the best came after I let him calm down and get back to work. Everyone else in the office watched me do it, no one said a thing, but they all had their eyes on me as I waited 5 minutes before picking up my phone on my desk and slowly dialed the number at his desk. It rings, everyone turns to look at him, he's on the computer, picks up the phone, slaps it to his ear, radio battalion SIMOSONOFAB*TCH. Turns his head, ear was caked full of petroleum jelly I had dumped all over the earpiece of the phone. Master Guns and Major told me these antics and pranks made that deployment. CWO Ryan, if you're reading this, sorry, not sorry. No more friends, job, or car for you. A little history about where I was at before all of this. I'm female and I had a very rocky relationship with my father, and my mum had just kicked me out at 19 with nowhere to go. My dad actually stepped up and helped me for the first time in my life by getting me into an apartment in my podunk little hometown in South Idaho. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd and started going to parties and doing the things I missed out on doing with friends in high school. I was a goody two-shoes up to that point, and a late bloomer who wasn't used to getting males' attention, meaning I was a virgin. I started hanging out at the park playing horseshoes and letting my friends get me absolutely trashed when I met a cowboy called Slick. I didn't have much of an interest in him other than just talking about old Western movies. I'm a huge movie buff and actors from the silver screen of classic 1950s movies. Slick and I both worked for the same company, as did 98% of the small town we lived in, so we knew each other in passing. He started coming in to get horse meds and other vet supplies and always asked me to wait on him. Okay, whatever, that was my job. One of our mutual friends invited me to a bonfire at their house, which was right across from where Slick was staying in a bunkhouse. I went not even expecting to see Slick there and had actually taken one of my best friends with me to keep an eye out for me because I've never been a trusting person due to past traumas as a kid. A few hours pass, we're all drinking and Slick keeps putting his arm around me and trying to dominate whatever conversation I'm having with my friends, especially around my guy friends. I'm tipsy and not really caring about it too much and go off with a few of my girlfriends in a group where we're gossiping and talking. A couple of hours pass by and my friend who I drove up to the party with took off with another friend for a beer run. They never came back to the party. The party is winding down. I don't feel comfortable driving home with any form of alcohol in my system and Slick says he has a spare cot in his room I can have. I didn't feel comfortable going, but my other friends assured me Slick was trustworthy. We got to his room, there was no cot. Slick says he'll sleep on the floor and we can watch Blazing Saddles because he'd heard it was one of my favorites. I said fine and crawled into his bed fully clothed, sans shoes. Well, I'm sure you can guess what happened, so I'm not going to delve into the very unpleasant details. I didn't sleep the whole night. I just laid in the bed in disbelief that what had happened actually happened. Once I knew he was asleep, I snuck out of his room and drove home, sobered by the experience. I don't know how long I sat in the shower, but the water ran cold and I called out sick from work for 2 days. Over the next few days, I had bruises that covered my entire body. I had bite marks, and scratches, and fingertip bruises everywhere. I had also developed one of the worst UTIs I've ever experienced in my life and called the town clinic for an examination to make sure everything was okay and declined to report it because the cops in my very small and rural town always sided with the men when women I knew reported their assaults. Slick became an awful force in my life. When he wasn't bothering me at work, he was leaving deceased rattlesnakes on my doorstep and telling all of our mutual friends and acquaintances how he put another notch in his belt, and pretty soon after all of his buddies stopped hanging around him when they realized he was a piece of crap. The revenge. My dad is a 6'8" giant Cossack Russian. He worked as a machinist for many years, making his already big hands thick and calloused, important for later. He's a very intimidating man, and has a violent streak. Because I was on bad terms with my mum, I turned to him fully trusting him as someone I could confide in. His wife had to take pictures of my bruises for my doctor's file. I don't know why the doctor didn't take them herself. She told me to bring them in for the file on my health to go with the assault report. My dad was livid, but he pushed his fury deep down and waited for later. Slick drove a really sh*TTY Oldsmobile. He also liked to go out drinking every day after work. A few of my friends had been filled in as to what Slick did, and thus the rest of the town knew as news spreads like the plague in tiny towns. Slick's crappy car mysteriously caught on fire outside of the busy bar, yet nobody saw how it started. 2 weeks after his car burned up, my hometown had its annual birthday celebration. My dad goes to it every year and catches up with friends he hasn't seen in a long time. This means also visiting the town's bar. This is what my dad ended up telling me after everything happened. He walked in, said hello to the owner, and demanded to know where the one called Slick was. The bar owner begged him not to make a huge scene, and to just keep things civil since he knew what my dad was there for. He told my dad that Slick was playing poker on the deck out back and my dad went out looking for him. He found Slick and asked him if Slick knew who he was. Slick was disrespectful and said he didn't give a crap who he was. He was busy playing poker with his friends, who weren't really friends, but guys who knew my dad and just watched everything happen. Strike 1. My dad told him he was my dad, and he needed to talk to him about respecting young women. Slick said there wasn't anything about me to respect. Strike 2. My dad tells Slick to get his butt out of the chair and speak to him like a man. Slick tells my dad to p*s off. Strike 3. My dad picked up Slick, who is 5'4" and at the time was 180 pounds, by his collar and stuck his thumb into Slick's right eye socket. My dad said he had never heard a grown man scream like a woman before then, and all he could do was smile about it. He dropped Slick on the ground and walked out of the bar. My dad was afraid the cops were going to be coming for him, so he found me at the concession stand I was working at to tell me everything that had happened before he left back for home. Nobody called the cops. The following week, the bosses at the company caught wind of what Slick had done to me and had already had an investigation open against him because they had noticed some very expensive horseshoeing tools had gone missing, with him being the only person around at the time. I should add that the company, though very large, was a tight-knit family-oriented business in this small town. Both of my parents work there, and the bosses had known me since I was knee-high. They were very upset and ended up firing him and gave him 12 hours to vacate the company premises, including the bunkhouse. I only saw Slick in person once more about a month later, and his eye was still black. I had anxiety when I saw him, so I didn't stick around long for howdy dos. It's a bit painful to remember, but I'm still healing and moving on from it 10 years later. My life has gotten better, and I know his life is miserable, and that makes me happy. The next one is titled, "She had a detailed paper trail to cover her butt." I had a manager try and fire me for being rude to a caller. The caller wanted us to call internationally to confirm insurance. I asked the current floor supervisor if we could, and he said no, so I told the caller we couldn't. She ended the call and I went to ask the supervisor if there was anything we could do and was told we could not. I asked him to email that answer to me and he did. I got called in and was told that I was unprofessional on the phones and that I was not following correct procedures and that I was being investigated, with the consideration that I would be fired. My supervisor had no spine, so I was in agreement that I needed to be fired. I was told we do not ever tell a member no, and that she had spoken with the supervisor who told me to say no, and he denied it and claimed I never asked him. Luckily I had 3 years of weekly emails I saved and printed out that showed me, every Thursday, asking my supervisor if I was doing okay on the phones, how I could improve, and if there were any classes I could take to improve my skill and knowledge. Every reply was praised with how well I was doing, how I was being considered as or doing well as a trainer. I became one after a year, and had reviews of my work attached. Every single QA review gave me 100% scores, and I was the only one on the whole team who consistently got 100% reviews. I also had a large file full of customer compliments, where they asked to speak with a supervisor to praise my work, and then I am given a certificate. I also included the email from the supervisor who instructed me to say no. I quietly put this all together in an inch-thick file and made 3 copies. I was called back to discuss my reprehensible behavior and to review calls I had made as evidence of my bad service. As we listened, the manager pointed out how cold and emotionless I sounded. I agreed that it could have been taken this way if one were to look for a problem, but my phone voice is always calm and careful so that I am easily understood. I have been told how much it is appreciated by our callers, since we mostly deal with the elderly and doctors' offices, and they appreciated that my information was clearly presented, since misunderstandings can be very bad. I had customer compliments that often included appreciation for the way I spoke. 3 out of 5 of the calls we reviewed, she said, were the worst interactions she had ever heard. I said that was odd, since I had a certificate for all 3 calls, signed by my supervisor and her, and certificates weren't given out until the call was listened to. The other 2 problematic calls were ones where I had received a 100% score by the QA department. So I asked, well, my supervisor is telling me weekly that I am doing the best on the team, the QA department is telling me I am always meeting 100% of my goals, and the customers are giving me positive reviews. Sue, if my attitude has been such a problem for so long, why wasn't it addressed before? No answer. I demanded to know why this issue was allowed to continue for so long. The manager asked me to return to my desk but asked that I leave my folder of evidence for review, which I did. I went to lunch, and when I returned I was told there was a computer error that wiped my email profile and all saved emails from my email account, and my computer had been reformatted to fix the error. I asked the supervisor about it and she said she needed to talk to the manager. I was called in again and told that without any evidence to back up my claims of 100% QA scores and my customer appreciation certificates, they had no choice but to move forward. I asked where my printed copy went to, and the manager claimed she didn't have it and that I had never given her a copy. So I pulled out another copy of all the paperwork and explained that deleting it off my computer didn't delete my copies, nor the copies she had no access to on the company cloud, which is where I backed up my information daily. Something that was so uncommon the supervisor didn't even know it was something we could do. I then asked for an HR representative, and the manager said I waived my right to have an HR rep present when I didn't ask for one at the start of this mess. I said the matter should be put to rest, and the manager said she was the one who decided this as she was the one in charge. She also handed me a write-up and demanded I sign it. I took the time to read it, and of course it had me admitting that I was 100% at fault and that I would not retaliate in the slightest regardless of action. It wasn't even on the company's disciplinary form, it was written in Word. I was done. I decided to just go with the nuclear option. Instead of quietly trying to talk to HR, I went far above their heads. I grabbed the write-up and walked out. The manager went to stop me until she saw me walk into the office of the director of all the call centers in the company, a guy who was magnitudes above her and who I was on friendly terms with. He asked what was up, and I told him that the manager was in the process of trying to fire me. I gave him the write-up and my folder of evidence, and he went from friendly disinterest to dead serious. 30 minutes later he finished reviewing everything and said, "Follow me." We returned to the manager's office and she turned white when director told manager to call in supervisor an hour. He kept asking her what she was trying to do, why she was going after me, and why she felt it was okay to try and delete evidence from my computer. He never yelled, he would ask her a question and then patiently wait for an answer, which she couldn't give. Whenever she would bring me up or look at me, director would say something like, "No, don't look at him, you and I are talking right now." When supervisor arrived he did the same to her. No answers, just stammering and half excuses. HR arrived and the manager jumped to speak over me to give her side. The supervisor did the same once the manager was done. They were clearly trying to run out the clock since HR was a small department and had blocked out time for meetings. I finally mentioned this and the HR person said that they had cancelled all other meetings today and she would be there as long as it took to get to the bottom of the issue. The manager looked enraged, supervisor looked pale and terrified. I was then taken to a separate office to give my side. The manager said she had the right to be there and the director told her and supervisor that they had the right to sit there and wait. Both were told they were not to leave until he told them they could, because both were known to disappear and go home if any problems happened on the floor. HR, director, and I had a nice chat. We went over my evidence and call history, listened to the call they started the whole landslide, and then asked if there was anything I think I could have done better. I said that I could have asked a different supervisor for help. I used the HR person's laptop to pull up my stuff I had saved on the cloud, and there it was, document after document proving my side, emails from supervisor, emails from manager, all praising me. Proof of my 100% QAs, everything. Director was almost gleeful that he finally had something concrete because there had been complaints about the manager and supervisor, but those complaining never did anything. He called the QA manager in and got a statement about my QA scores and how I was professional 100% of the time, and pulled in supervisors from other teams who confirmed I was a pleasure to work with and always went above and beyond to help. It felt pretty good to know I was actually appreciated by people who matter. You don't get that often in a call center environment. They agreed I had done nothing wrong and asked that as far as they were concerned the matter was closed for me, but they would be looking into manager and supervisor. They couldn't tell me anything officially, of course. The manager and supervisor got official disciplinary actions with a threat to terminate if they were caught doing this again, ever. The supervisor was demoted and transferred out of the department completely. I heard that it basically ruined her career with the company since the actions were so serious. The manager ended up moving to a different office at lower pay and about 40 minutes farther from her home because her actions against me opened the floodgates against her and she could be fired or take the far worse position. She ended up quitting after about a month. Why did the supervisor and manager decide they hated me? I don't know exactly what caused it, but apparently they had problems with me for a couple of years and would talk to other employees about me behind my back about what a lazy and bad employee I was. Of course, some people agreed, that's the nature of the beast, but it was rewarding to know that most of them disagree. Keep your paper trail, folks, and be friendly with upper management. The next one is titled, "Steal My Dog? I'll Get You Fired." I adopted a full-breed husky in the Pacific Northwest. We named him Toby, but after a while, he developed the name Real Big Toby. He wasn't a huge husky or Malamute, but boy did he look beautiful, and boy was his personality, really big. He had one blue eye and one brown eye which never failed to trip people out. On top of that, he was a huge ham, loved attention and would actually talk to you about how his day was going. It got to the point where it was kind of stupid to put him on a leash. I would tell him to stay when I went into class, for example, and he'd be passed out or getting the chicks to scratch his belly when I came out. Every time. The dean of the college even knew him on a first-name basis and started to bring his dog into work after watching Real Big Toby do his thing. At the time I lived in a mountain town, attended college and was an avid mountain biker, so having a dog that would happily and easily do 30 miles in a day was cool. He would follow us everywhere we went. My mountain bike was my only source of transportation, so we became very in tune with one another. He was a husky, after all, so you could tell when he ran that this was exactly what he was born to do. Toby was such a super good boy. He listened, paid attention and never left my side. He had a seat designated for him on the deck at the local coffee shop, which meant you had to walk by him and try to resist giving him a scratch if you wanted to go inside. It got to the point where just about everyone in this fairly small town got to know Toby on a first-name basis. Every once in a while on mountain bike runs we would get separated or Toby would just get sidetracked on the way down the hill. It was such a small town that, in the few times it happened, he was back with me by the end of the day. The police all knew him from around town, the pound knew him, so if anyone called they'd just give them my number. One day it happened again. He got lost on the way down the hill. Only this time, he didn't come back. No call. Nothing. For days. It got to the point where I started asking around town. If you've ever lived in a small town, you know it's hard to keep a secret. After about a week, a friend says he saw Toby and tracked the guy down and gave him my number. He never called. After searching, trying to find this guy, the first finally got a breakthrough. He worked at the college. Now, I am aware of how stupid people can be when they receive an animal. Toby was ripped. You could see his muscles bulging out of his fur. He didn't have an ounce of fat on him because he was in excellent shape. I fed him mostly a raw diet, and what kibble he did get was the best you could buy. The first thing out of this guy's mouth was to tell me that he's keeping my dog. You don't take care of him. You don't even feed him, and he's such a good dog. He will be better off with me, he said. I became enraged. Well, as I mentioned, he worked at the school I attended. I also mentioned the dean hammed it up with Toby on a nearly daily basis. I didn't mention I had the dean's home number, though, so a call Saturday morning resulted in Toby being returned to me later that day. This guy had the nerve to, along with Toby, bring me a 50-pound bag of the sh*TTIEST store brand of dog food you could buy. I bought you this so you could feed him. Rage. Come to find out, this guy was in charge of a research project for the school. It was very easy to figure out where his office was. I went to his office with a plan for returning his food and chewing him out in front of his colleagues. He wasn't at his desk, so I did the most natural thing I could possibly do. I turned the 50-pound bag of dog food upside down on his desk, computer, and stacks of papers to the point where it formed a perfect mountain on top of his keyboard. Truly an awesome sight. Knowing loose lips sink ships, I didn't tell anyone but my close friends. The school brought misconduct charges against me. The hearing was in front of a board of other students and staff, and well, I don't know what happened to the bag of dog food. I was telling the story to a bunch of guys and one of them asked me for the bag. That's the last I saw it. All charges were dropped. The butthole that tried to steal Real Big Toby had it much worse. 50 pounds of dog food on top of your research project, as it turns out, doesn't bode well with management. For reasons unknown, 2 days later he was fired from the college. Not only did they fire him but put a restraining order on him and had to change the locks to the building. The next one is titled, "She Followed the Assignment to the Letter." For a bit of backstory, my Calculus BC teacher in high school hated me and did her best to make my life difficult. One example of this, my school district swapped over to required uniforms that year, my last year, in fact. On Fridays, we were allowed to wear jeans and a t-shirt. I wore camo cargo pants. She sent me to the office because apparently jeans means blue jeans only. The lady at the office sent me back to the class with a note telling her to lay off. So she went to the principal about it, who decided to side with her. After this, I decided if she wanted to make things hard for me, I was going to return to favor. Late into the year, another teacher in a history class came up with a bonus assignment where you either modify an existing song to make it about history or write your own song about history, then perform it in front of the class. Apparently she liked this idea and decided to have us do a similar assignment about math. She told us it was a bonus assignment that we were required to do. I asked why, if it was a bonus assignment. Her answer was because she told us to. So I picked Around the World by Daft Punk. For reference, that song consists of the words Around the World repeated 144 times, I counted. I changed Around the World to derive the root because we were talking derivatives at the time. When the time came for us to perform the songs in front of the class, the person who went before me performed his own original song, including music from his guitar. Everybody loved it. When I went up, I stood there and monotonously said the words derive the root until she told me to stop. At first, she thought I was joking and she asked me to pull out my real song. I told her this very much was my real song. The small smile of disbelief faded and was immediately replaced by rage. So you just replaced 2 words in this song? I replaced more than half of the words in the song, yes. And you expect to get the same grade as asterisk so and so asterisk after he put so much work into his? Yes ma'am, I do. I followed the assignment to the letter. Are you ready for me to keep singing? I got a 100. Her hatred of me only grew. It was fun. The last one is titled, Short Guy Wins Against the Tall Guy Thanks to a Tube of Toothpaste. Summer after freshman year of high school I went to this tripping camp in Vermont, tripping meaning going on long canoe, hiking, camping trips in the Northeast and Canada. There was this new guy that year who was about 6 feet 3 inches, cross-eyed, a Neanderthal-looking creature with a limited vocabulary and loved boasting to us fellow campers about his hot girlfriend who was ugly by the way. This guy was a brute and standing at 5 feet 5 inches at the time. I had a negative disposition towards anyone a lot taller than me. I've gotten over this. This guy was *uche straight up, I can't say it enough. Anyway, we more or less got along at the time, but for some reason at breakfast in the dining hall one day he decided to pour syrup all over my head. In front of my friends and fellow counselors, for no reason, just thought it would be funny. The counselors thought it was of poor taste and everyone kind of had a "this is f***cked up" kind of expression on their face. I wanted to punch this dude square in the face at that instant but knew I'd probably get kicked out, so I played it cool. He apologized to me a couple of hours later and I acted like it was totally cool and we were boys. That night when camp activities were over, it was time for our age group to hike up this mountain and sleep in our cabins. The hike takes about 15 minutes if you're walking, but you can do it in about 5 if you sprint up it. I sprinted up to the cabins ahead of everyone, went to his cabin and found his bed. I then took another camper's toothpaste and squeezed it on this *uche's bed underneath his blanket and underneath his pillows. I used a lot of toothpaste but did it such that you couldn't notice it until you got in bed. An hour later it was lights out and from a few cabins away I hear this maddening screaming. My friends in this *uche's cabin told me how they all turned on the lights to find him covered from head to toe in toothpaste. Imagine this cross-eyed Neanderthal covered in crest. It was beautiful. One of those moments where I feel like the short guy won and the tall *uche never confronted me about it. Thanks for listening.